already. Okay. Unfortunately, mine doesn't come on, so. I have to let Stanford know. Actually, Brody, can you? Oh, there he is. Okay. Stanford.
Hi.
Hi.
Good.
Excellent. So we are recording now. I prepared the presentation. Thank you all for sending me all that really interesting information. What I did, I tried to condense it into some presentation, and I'm going to go through it. And if you could, I will actually ask questions from you on occasion, but if you want to intervene, just interrupt me. Like, this is a conversation. It's not a presentation. It's more, the presentation is a means to facilitate the conversation that we are having. Yeah, and for those that came later, my camera is not working. It just crashed as I was talking with Sally, I think. And so I'll share my screen in a second.
In the meanwhile, I just wanted to say hi to everyone here because it's my first time here. I'm substituting Professor Corrado from Italy because he has some lectures to do in this time. So I'm just here to help and substitute him for this meeting. So hello,
Thank you, Franz.
Franz. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz Giorgio. And since you started it, I'll ask everybody to just say who they are and their organization, like a very brief introduction so that we know who everybody is. So I'm going to go with Brody first.
Sure, Brody Hobson from Natural Resources Canada.
Richard?
Yeah, Richard London from the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, the manager of the building performance team, looking at Building Act and Building Code legislation.
In New Zealand, right? Yeah. Jörg?
Hello, everybody. I'm also new. My name is Jörg Dietrich. I'm from Switzerland. I'm working for the Swiss Society of Engineers and Architects, and we are the body for developing standards and regulations for the building industry.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yes. Hi, my name is Sarah Peterson, and I work for the Swedish Energy Agency. And we work right now with the implementation of EPBD and work together with the other agencies that's in charge of the regulations.
Thank you, Sarah. Sally?
Hi, I'm Sally Semple. I work with the Building Safety Regulator in the UK, and we develop the building codes, the building standards for the built environment within England and Wales. And my particular responsibilities are for energy efficiency, overheating, and ventilation. And this is my first time here as well. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Tristan?
Hey, my name is Tristan Grant. I'm the Director of Codes and Policy at the New Buildings Institute, which is a national nonprofit in the US that works on energy and climate codes and policy, primarily high performance, net zero energy and carbon, and energy resilience in energy codes and local building policies. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tristan. Simon?
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name's Simon Jones. I'm the head of the EBC Support Services Unit, the Secretariat that supports MELI and the EBC.
Thank you. Roberto?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Roberto Lambert, Professor of Civil Engineering, Federal University of Santa Catarina, Laboratory for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, and we help the government developing codes and standards for energy efficiency in buildings.
In Brazil.
In Brazil, sorry.
No, it's okay. Mike?
Good evening, everyone. Michael Dodd from the Buildings Performance Policy team at the Australian Capital Territory in Australia. So I work for a federation, one of our federated jurisdictions in state government, and also a representative on the Building Codes Committee, which supports the Australian Building Codes Board to develop new building regulations for commercial, community and residential buildings. And I work primarily on new energy efficiency and renewable energy minimum standards for those buildings.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Ryan?
Hello, Ryan Kolker, Executive Director for Energy, Resilience, and Innovation at the International Code Council, model code developer based in the US, but also works internationally.
Thank you. Takao?
Thank you, Barry. My name is Takao Sawachi from Japan. I have been working for Building Research Institute and the National Committee for Energy Calculation Methodologies for Building Energy Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Takao. Louis?
Hello, Louis Bourru from France, from CEREMA, French public agency, developing codes with the government.
Thank you. Jens?
Yes, hello, I'm Jens Lautsen from
Jens.
Danish Energy Agency. I work in our unit for energy efficiency and especially energy efficiency in buildings. And I also lead the concerted action EPBD implementing the energy performance of buildings directives in all our member states here in Europe.
Thank you, Jens. And last but not least, Stanford.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stanford Harrison. I'm the Director for Buildings Policy at the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water in Australia. Yes, and part of my work is about new buildings and building energy codes, specifically energy efficiency, resilience, embodied carbon, overheating, all the topical issues we're here to discuss.
Excellent. So thank you all. I'm going to go to our next slide. So basically, I asked you, and you provided. Thank you for all the information that I received. What I did is I looked at the input and I extracted some things that I saw recurring. So like this thing, right sizing codes for jurisdiction is particularly interesting for Canada, but I assume regardless of the size of the country, one has to provide some thought about that. The next item that came quite strongly was the code compliance and closing the compliance gap. So for the first, actually, that's what I'm going to do. Like, Ryan, you mentioned that the right sizing codes for jurisdiction, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's somebody else. You did? Did you have anything in mind when you mentioned that?
I mean, a few things. We work a lot with emerging economies that sort of look at codes from developed economies and look to sort of integrate a lot of the practices that are incorporated in those codes, and they just don't work in those jurisdictions because they don't have the infrastructure, or they're sort of copying standards that they don't use or materials that they don't use. And so being sort of very deliberate about sort of how to engage effectively to actually get progress and results.
So this will be one of the things that we want to accomplish at some point, is essentially to be able to help other countries to implement these codes. There was an energy efficiency IA 2024 publication. It was saying it's something like 100 countries do not really have any codes. So this is an important effort maybe to do. We'll have to reach out to representatives of the different countries and see how we could help. The code compliance part is it's everywhere, but in like one of the things that we noticed in Canada is that our codes are getting much better, but the buildings are not doing that much better. Like the comparative difference between what we expect the buildings to be doing and reality is a little bit different. So like we are looking at this and this could be part of something that we could expand. Practically everybody was talking about the embodied and the operational carbon. So that's something that is it's quite everywhere. And the other thing that was mentioned was the cost benefit and affordability issue. Like I think there is something along those lines practically everywhere. I don't know, like Jens, do you see that as part of the PPD? Yeah.
I needed to find the microphone again. Yeah, we also often discuss compliance issues, and that's as well when we discuss building codes. We have a long tradition for building codes, as example, here in Denmark. And we also made comparisons between the calculated energy consumption in new buildings and in older buildings, and we found a curve saying in older buildings they often use less energy than you calculate because people save by not using a room or putting down the temperature. While in new buildings you can see there is more and more gap from what you calculate and up to the energy consumption that people actually have. And a part of this is compliance. And it is an important issue. The more complicated building code, the more need you have to work with a compliance and who are checking the people who check the compliance, etc. All of these issues. Yes, we do.
Excellent. Yeah, it's and then there is the issue of how do you check compliance? But we'll come to that later. And then resilience is coming up. Originally, I was thinking we would have presentations on resilience, but then I started receiving all this excellent information. I thought it would be best to push it a little bit further out. Sally, you mentioned that one of your work responsibilities deals with resilience. Do you want to comment on that?
I'm not sure I did. I think I may have misspoken. It's I deal with energy efficiency, overheating, and ventilation.
In my mind, overheating is part of resilience. That's what, when I hear overheating, I hear resilience.
Yes, so that's a very interesting aspect of the very interesting aspect of the code, particularly in the UK. We've got the impact of climate change is not felt equally across the UK. Relatively small country, but with a big diversity of cooling requirements. And the overheating was introduced as a building code in 2021 in the UK for England, and it's an interesting bit of the code. We can see it has been coincident with introducing that code. We've been monitoring what's been happening in the built environment, and we're now seeing, particularly in areas of the southern UK, that mechanical ventilation is now becoming standard, particularly in multi-dwelling apartment blocks, and so that's it. It's been a successful introduction building code because the compliance has is in tandem with what the construction industry was providing anyway. We're starting to get demand from residents for buildings that have mechanical ventilation already incorporated. So it's been interesting to view that monitoring and to try and work out what impact has it just been the impact of the construction industry, or has the overheating code added to that, just provided the extra nudge? Also, alongside that, because it was a recently introduced piece of regulation, and because we have a relatively new government in the UK, every new government, when it comes into force, wants to look at deregulation. And our new government has also it's preparing to launch a new form of regulation, the Future Home Standard, that aims to essentially electrify new buildings. And the very powerful construction lobby have chosen the overheating building code as a target to provide as an example of overregulation in existing codes. So although practically speaking, we have good compliance, the code is working with building construction, it's working to provide resilience for an anticipated change in the climate. All of that looks good, but we start to get very odd forms of political pressure requiring us to justify the need for aspects of the overheating code. So it's a very interesting case study about codes and how they operate within a policy environment. And the pressures don't always come from the things that you expect, because, as I said, the overheating code is working with standard practice in construction. That's not really a problem, but it's being used as a political lever by the construction industry as an example of overregulation.
Interesting. I just had an exchange with Mike about how the Canadian Home Builders Association was saying, send a message to our Prime Minister to say we are over-regulating, and look at Australia, they stopped developing codes or something along those lines about that. But I don't want to go in that direction in this discussion. It was not, how do you call it, a very pleasant kind of exchange with the Canadian Home Builders Association. But since I mentioned Mike, you raised the electrification priority in your email to me. Can you expand a little bit on it?
Yeah, Australia is transitioning its electricity grid relatively rapidly. It will be, we've gone from a very, very dirty energy generation system for electricity with lots of coal, especially brown coal. But our sort of large-scale renewable policy has been relatively successful over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, and renewables, like they are in many parts of the world, are growing very, very quickly. But we still have a lot of gas in buildings for space heating, for cooking, for water heating, and we're moving to take advantage of the amount of renewable energy we have in our grid by transitioning to trying to electrify buildings. It's much easier for new buildings, and our most recent building code, the one which is being paused but is also being implemented at the moment. So the pause that's happening in Australia is happening after we implement the current code, and then we'll be paused for about 4 years, which is roughly the length of time that our code takes to develop anyway. So it's an interesting political spin that's being placed on what's happening here.
Yeah.
So for commercial buildings going forward across Australia, you are still able to connect your building to gas, but if you do so, then there are a number of annoying things that you will be required to do. So you must make sure that your building has the expanded electrical capacity so that you can transition any gas appliances to electrical appliances in the future. So you have to make sure that you're paying for that electrical capacity. There has to be physical space within the building in terms of building electrical switchboards, electrical risers. If you have plant and equipment room, it must be big enough to transform from, a condensing gas boiler into a series of heat pumps to provide the same amount there. So there's essentially it's saying we are expecting that you will be required to electrify your plant room within the life of the building. So sometime within the next 10, 15 years, there is expectation that we will be electrifying 2 states. The one that I live and work in, the Australian Capital Territory, are now banning new gas connections. Victoria, the capital is Melbourne, which is our second most populous state, has banned new gas connections from I think beginning of next this financial year. Stanford, you maybe have the date, but it's very soon, and it's been moving that way, to signaling that for a while. But there are issues in terms of electrifying existing buildings, which I understand a lot of people are facing. So if you have gas-fired heating systems in our colder climates, gas for cooking, gas for hot water within existing buildings, there are issues with all of those things I mentioned before in terms of plant room supply, electrical capacity, electrical space on switchboards, and those type of things that we'll be grappling with, which makes the transition from gas to electric quite expensive in a lot of cases.
Thank you for that. I realized that we're halfway almost through our meeting, and I only am on the second slide. So I will accelerate a little bit, but it's just to mention that these priorities are not all of the things that you proposed, and also they are not in any particular priority. So like I would think addressing the occupants is the highest priority in buildings, and codes should reflect that. But I'll go to the next slide. There are a number of planned activities that you all mentioned, and as you can imagine, there is an overlap between the priorities and the planned activities. So, like, I was thinking that maybe we could essentially look at these planned activities and share what we learned from this as part of our work plan, essentially. It's worthwhile mentioning, like the digitalization roadmap makes me think about AI, and that meeting we had the last symposium, and the importance of addressing possibly how to make things faster, but then considering at the same time the implications on of the AI that is happening, and then the compilation of affordability studies, and then a number of tools that offer the possibility of essentially organizing some webinars to cover what the current state of affairs is. I don't remember who mentioned about the simplified energy simulation tool. I think that makes life easier for the consultants, but then at the same time, it becomes a problem if it's not robust enough. I do not know, like, Tristan, have you looked at the different tools that are used for code compliance or for evaluating the performance of new construction?
What we have, to a degree, we don't, as an organization, do energy simulation, but we do support codes and standards development for integrating energy simulations. We will have a simplified performance rating method hosted on our website soon that's intended to be an open source procedure that simulation providers can use and integrate into their software. We're seeing broad interest in that from the utility sector for electric utilities and utilities that run energy efficiency programs, and from states and other government agencies that want to use simplified performance modeling to test and evaluate the energy savings opportunities of different building design and energy measures without having to require the full effort associated with typical simulations. So we do see some interest in that here, and we'll have that available. I can let folks know when it's hosted. There's pushback from, certain interests that feel it's either not robust enough or that they have infrastructure invested in the more complicated tools.
I can imagine, yeah. The other thing is the energy modeling of heat pumps and the work that Takao is doing as part of Annex 88, and the requirement to avoid idealizing the situations, the systems, and using reality as a reflection of what we are going to be simulating. Takao, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, yes. First of all, in Japan, we are using, we have developed online energy calculation program for everybody. It is free, and it can also be used for the education in university. So some teachers are using them. And anyway, the Japanese government is continuing the investment for the improvement of energy calculation too, because it is very important for the success of building energy code to realize very reliable evaluation tool for building energy code. So they are continuing investment for the improvement of energy calculation tool. And one of the issues related to the reliability of the energy calculation tool is how we can calculate. We can estimate energy consumption by heat pump systems, because heat pump is very promising and very important key technology to realize decarbonization of building. So, and we have found a very big gap between the real energy consumption by heat pump system and energy consumption predicted by using existing product-based indices, performance indices, such as, for example, SEER or SCOP or APF, something like that, developed by manufacturing industries, not building industries. So I can say that there is a big gap between the understanding between building industry and manufacturing industry of heat pumps. So that is one example of issue to be improved in the near future. Thank you, Mary.
No problem. So the other item that I asked you to provide is what the needs are for your jurisdictions, and as you can see, there are some. We already touched on this, and between the priorities and the and the what was I saying? Planned activities. The needs are overlapping essentially. So cost-benefit analysis is one of those ones. Strategies for advancing compliance. We already talked about it, Jens. You described what is happening in Europe. And strategies for incorporating embodied and operational carbon in codes. In terms of Jörg, in Switzerland, is this something that is of interest, for example?
Yeah, this is something of interest. We have the embodied carbon, which now the cantons on the federal state they have to, and on the cantonal state they have to implement over the next year. So similar to the European countries. So.
Okay, excellent. And then we mentioned about code advances available to different jurisdictions. Rajan, you mentioned that you were going to be late, so welcome. Can you present yourself? I'm about to ask you a question.
Yeah, hello. I'm Rajan Rawal from CEPT University, Ahmedabad, and happy to be here. About the codes and cooling, I think we have building codes for commercial buildings and for residential buildings. Primarily, the commercial building one the model was based on 90.1 ASHRAE. However, the enforcement and implementation is the key here. Not many states could do that. And hence, we don't know how many buildings are actually complying to that. In a recent time, about a year back, we got another version where embodied energy has been included only for a reporting purpose and not for the compliance purpose.
Thank you. Roberto, how is it in Brazil with that, in that respect?
Well, in fact, building codes tend to be local municipality business, but there was big pressure from the industry to have standards to avoid local jurisdiction on that. So our standards are new. They involve for residential buildings natural ventilation and air conditioning. So we evaluated both. For commercial buildings, we don't have standards yet. We only have labeling systems. Residential, we have labeling systems also. And the labeling systems have been there for 10 years, 15 years, and very low adoptance by the market. But this year, what we have is that the ministry approved the minimum energy efficiency standards for all buildings in Brazil, with an implementation timeline that goes to 2030. 2035 in some cases, and we are working this year on building the implementation plan. So it's a huge effort. We have 5,000 municipalities, 200 million people, 60 million buildings, and so it's a big effort to do, and a lot of reaction from the building industry, as I've heard before.
Yes.
They don't like regulations.
No. Yeah. One thing that came up also was the occupant health into the code. I know Simon has been working on indoor environment. Simon, do you want to comment? I know that you are not associated with any particular jurisdiction, but you have a lot of experience with indoor environment.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a bit of a too big a question to be able to answer. I mean, what we've seen, particularly from a ventilation perspective, to kind of build on Sally's point earlier, is that increasingly through Europe, we're seeing independent inspection of ventilation systems becoming a very important part of the building code structure, as we have done with air tightness, to be fair, over the last decade or so. So I think there's a recognition, particularly with codes of a technical nature, that policing is an incredibly important part of that. And before it reaches building control and industry, that independent inspection can be a very important jigsaw puzzle, piece of the jigsaw puzzle to implement. And what's been interesting, particularly from my perspective, from a ventilation compliance perspective, is how many different ways there are of doing that. So I think it shows that there are many ways to approach a problem with energy code, with codes. that can be specific to a particular jurisdiction and how they're policing their building standards and their building control typically work. So I think that's something that's definitely worth considering here when we look at building energy codes. Is how is this policed? How is this followed up? How do we know that what we say we're actually getting in practice? And I think there's a lot of work being done in other areas of code work that can give us some insight there potentially.
Thank you for that, Simon. Sarah, you mentioned about Sweden being electrified and the challenges between the grid and the building at some point. Do you want to comment on that aspect?
Yeah, yes, I can do that. Yeah, exactly. Because since it's more electrified, there are other areas that we need to address, like peak demand. So we have that now in the building regulation. It's also connected to the implementation of EPBD, of course, to have like the maximum installed capacity that you can have. So it's energy use, but also the flexibility aspect. So that's also an important part. And also with the climate, we have a cold climate. So especially during the winter, it can be a problem.
Thank you for that. For the more time cooling dominated countries like India and Brazil, well, to a certain extent, Australia too. Is that something that you are looking at, the electricity and the capacity of the system to provide cooling, for example? Rajan, do you want to start? Oops, we lost Rajan. I guess, Roberto, maybe you can comment on that?
Yeah, well, we are mainly an electric country, so we don't have problems with that.
Okay.
And we are slowly getting rid of the gas that we use for cooking and hot water.
Okay. So you don't have a problem with peak demand or anything? You have enough hydro to compensate for that?
Well, renewables are raising also other renewables like solar and wind power. So yes, it's a combination of hydro, solar, and wind, and it's going well. But of course, the main problem is the energy poverty. So
yeah,
as you get people with money, they will start buying split systems, and this will bring a peak problem to the grid.
Okay.
In fact, last year, normally we sell about 4 million splits per year, and I think last year we sold 6 million. So
wow,
yeah, it's
a
growing.
big jump.
But it's some of it is being used during the day where we have a lot of solar to the grid. So
yeah,
our main problem in the grid is batteries.
Okay.
We're losing some renewable at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks. Rajan, I see you are back.
Yeah, I'm back. So in terms of cooling requirement and especially the building, the two things are happening in India. One is through the building codes, which we are trying to optimize building envelope and increase the minimum energy performance standards for room air conditioners and other air conditioners in buildings, but which is part of the code. That means it's going to be mandated. But at the same time, we have the STAR labeling program, which is voluntary programs, and they go ahead of the code in terms of MEPS and prescribing MEPS because they have a graded performance standards from 5-star to 1-star. So that's one side through the Ministry of Power, which is responsible for electricity and consumption and so on and so forth. But at the same time, the Ministry of Urban and Housing, which is dealing with the urban space as well as housing, affordable housing, a whole lot of effort is going towards providing a cooling in urban area through buildings or even I would say emergency cooling shelters across the cities heat action plans are getting developed in event of heat emergency or heat waves, and early warning systems. And to deal with the cooling part, the two separate work stream. One is code through the building code, and second is urban sector affordable housing part. And these are two ways by which a union ministry, which is central, and state ministries also working together. That's brief from my side.
Thank you, Rajan. One thing that I didn't really see any mention is metrics. You know, like what kind of metrics are being used, or the choice of metrics. Richard, do you want to comment how metrics, what metrics are used in Australia? And then I'll go to Rajan. Yeah. In New Zealand. Sorry.
Yes, New Zealand. Most
Sorry, I
definitely.
apologize.
It's near
That's
enough.
all right. It's I think we're just the southern state of Australia, aren't we? Look, we've been
Sorry
looking.
about
Not a problem. In terms of overheating, one of the research projects we've got at the moment is looking at what sort of metrics we should be using, and we've been looking at things based on TM59, also TM52, which is looking at basically relative humidity, ventilation rates, metabolic rates and clothing levels, air temperature and mean radiant temperature. And this is using SET, which is the standard effective temperature. And the idea is that we can get a much better set of inputs to basically see whether people can cool themselves, whether that be through their own use of fans and things like that, or whether it be air conditioning type units that come in. And this is something that at the moment we've been collaborating with Australia. One of the people there, Mike, you might know Richard Didier, along with Stanford. You've probably heard of his name before. And we have come up with a methodology which at some point we'll be willing to share with the group here, specifically to try and create this set of metrics which are standardized. Because at the moment what we've found is that there really isn't something that's international. People don't really take into account heat stress and thermal stress, which is what we're looking at in terms of building code, is to say we want to make sure that people don't get to this point where they're in this condition of thermal stress and their well-being is affected. By the time you get to, shall we say, thermal stress, you're probably in a critical state. And I think the idea there of what I heard in India about having these locations where you could go to get relief from that in terms of sort of heat relief is a really interesting idea. In New Zealand, mostly we tend to be worried about, oh, it's too cold. But actually, as we see climate change occurring in different parts of New Zealand, certainly in the upper North Island, overheating is a significant problem. And also within building typologies that relate to apartment blocks and, should we say, more medium and higher density living arrangements. Hopefully that covers it.
Yeah, like we have serious overheating occurrences in Canada, like in places where overheating never occurred, like in British Columbia, for example. It's generally mild, but people have died due to overheating. So this is becoming a serious concern for the codes. I'll go to Rajan and then Stanford and then Tristan.
Thanks, Melik. I think that for our building codes, we do refer to SCT, standard effective temperature, as well as we prescribe adaptive model. So that means the operative temperature is also been prescribed, although the option of picking up metrics belongs to owner or a designer, either SCT or operative temperature. But this is for the comfort level. And increasingly we see that uncomfortable situation does not mean it is heat stress. And we try to separate out the comfort and heat stress, so that the heat stress inside the building, generally it's a heat index, or now we have the new report coming out, which is extended heat index. So in a summary, we have for buildings, we have a SET and TOP operative temperature. For urban heat or outside, a large part of the population live and work outside the buildings. For that, we use extended heat index as a metrics. But this is for the operations part. What we have observed, especially from international groups who are trying to estimate cooling demand for India, they still keep using cooling degree day and heating degree day. And more so cooling degree day, where 18 degrees centigrade, they use it as a base temperature to define how many people in India will require a cooling. Now, 18 degree for us is like 10 degree lesser than what our neutral temperatures are, which is 28 degree. And hence a large amount of cooling projections are quite off than what we need in India. Thanks.
Thank you, Rajan. Stanford?
Yes, I mean, that's one of the topical things we're doing at the moment. We're getting compiling over heat wave files so that we can test exactly that. What are the practical things that we would need to do in the construction code to enable our new buildings in the future to avoid that issue of heat stress? Having a definition of physiological heat stress, it does seem to be there's a variety of definitions out there, and that's something which we're trying to settle in Australia, is how hot is too hot. And it does seem to be there's a lot of different answers to that question, and certainly be interested, as Rajan was just pointing out. We've got a wide range of climate zones, and what is heat stress to somebody in the bottom of Australia is very different to the top of Australia, and we just need a common definition.
Yeah, overheating is quite an important subject in all sorts of jurisdictions. Thanks for that, Stanford. Tristan?
Yeah, NBI is also looking at how to integrate some of the metrics that have been referenced, set temperature and set degree hours. And I think some of the challenges that we're running into are where to establish the set degree hour temperature threshold. We've been looking at 26 and 28 degrees Celsius, and then counting degree hours over that and setting thresholds for that over a period of time. And then also looking at how to structure performance-based codes that look at the ability of a building to maintain habitable temperatures within or below those set degree hour temperature thresholds over an event. But the data and information on what temperatures and what set degree hour thresholds over that correlate to different amounts of heat stress and risk to building occupants is not super well figured out. And then also you can look at historical climate files, which is, has issues, but then also looking at forward climate projections is challenging in terms of how you select the appropriate projections and weather files and things like that.
Thank you for that, Tristan. Sally?
Yes, I was just going to come back to Richard's comments and also the latest ones about the definition, the metrics used for overheating. It was just his reference to CIBSE's Technical Memorandum 59, TM59, which is also used in the UK as the basis for our overheating calculation. We focus on overnight overheating. And the definition that's used within TM59 was derived in about 1975 from a very small sample of people. So that's been the focus in TM59 is we're working with CIBSE to update that, and also crucially to update that metric used for overnight overheating, because it hasn't really reflected or kept pace with the way people use their buildings. And that's likely to be the focus of, because of the difficulties that everybody's commented about before. We're focusing on that overnight heat stress because we feel that's where the greatest harm is done, and also where occupants have the least control over their environment is overnight, and where we're focusing the building codes. That does create quite a lot of problems and some conflicts with the construction industry, because it means that we place restrictions on the mitigation measures. The mitigation measures used for overheating have to be suitable for use overnight. So that's got things like guarding heights for windows, for openings, which the construction industry are objecting to. But it's just to say that it's an active topic in the UK, and that TM59 is in the process of being revised with a particular focus on that definition of what counts as overheating in an overnight environment. Also bringing in, there's been the revised weather files that are I've only looked at them for the UK, and they're, yeah, everywhere is going to overheat, apart from Glasgow, where I'm actually from. But we're going to live with that and be brave with it. But yeah, TM59 it's being actively reviewed at the minute.
Thank you. Louis, do you have any comments about the problem of overheating in France, for example?
Yes, we have the same approach as Tristan with degree hours for new buildings, but we don't have any policy for existing buildings for now.
Okay, thank you. So I see we only have 5 minutes left. Next time I'm going to put it longer. I think the discussion is so good. So I took everything that you sent me, and I came up with these ideas. Like, this is just to start the discussion going. It's not anything that I consider necessary or important if you do not. One thing that is quite obvious is that it would be really helpful to have some kind of a hub that we have the information stored, and if possible, if we get the funding, to create an AI kind of chatbot that will essentially inquire about the different aspects of codes. We are in Canada, in my team, we are in the middle of just playing around with some kind of interface that will inquire. Like we imagined in our case, we imagine an engineer asking the code for specific direction or characteristics that need to be considered. So I'm thinking, like the wealth of information, the wealth of knowledge that we have, you guys have, is amazing, and I think it would be good to find a way that it's more proactive rather than putting things on in a file and then forgetting about them. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? I see a smile from Jörg, or maybe somebody was making a joke. No, okay. I take that everybody's in agreement with me then. Tristan, what do you think? You are in the middle of on my screen.
About the work plan priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's the intent of the AI is that we could all post our resources and things like that, and the AI could help sort through that so that folks don't need to know what's on there so much as search for it.
Yeah. So, like for example, the discussion that we had for on overheating, there is so much information, but if you want a specific information for a particular climatic condition, then it becomes problematic to search through it in a manner that is efficient and effective. Plus, the documents are everywhere. Like they are in the UK, they are in New Zealand, in Australia, and if the EBC would be open to this kind of hosting, maybe that would be one contribution that this group could make for all of us. Essentially, we wouldn't have to search for for this kind of information.
Yeah, I think that could be helpful. It's already really great to hear about what everyone's working on. It seems like there's a lot of similar parallel efforts. So yeah, finding a way to make that more accessible sounds great.
Okay, so I'll give it some thought, and maybe I'll poke around your brains to figure out how to go ahead in the near future. The other thing is, it was obvious that the original idea that we had on overheating for a webinar was a valid one, and I'm thinking of having kind of quarterly webinars as we go forward. On subjects that essentially came up in this kind of discussion. I'm thinking of preparing a kind of a table for you to indicate interest and basically put a number for a priority on them, and then creating a work plan and a webinar around that. What are your thoughts about that idea? Simon, do you have, yeah, Richard?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good idea. I'm thinking in terms of the audience for the webinars, just understanding who it is that would be seeing them. I mean, it's all very well for us on the screen who should always have a specific and active interest, or whether it's something that we want to try and promulgate out further. Obviously, maybe other jurisdictions that are interested in what's going on in these areas and maybe interested in adopting some of those either approaches or at least finding the research and using it for their own development within their own countries. So I think just being careful of who the audience is that we expect for it would be the key thing.
Definitely. I think the way I envision it, there are two things that we need to reach out. Each of us has their own network of collaborators or interested parties. We could be like the hub with spokes around for our contacts. And the second way that I was thinking about, I need to talk with Simon about the EBC mailing list, for example, to see how we could leverage that mailing list to reach to as many people as possible. I think having an approach that is open and welcoming would be the best. And how to accomplish that, I have to give it a little bit more thought. But those are my initial ideas. I don't know what you think about. Simon, what do you think about this approach? You have a good knowledge of how to reach the audience.
Yeah, it's a good question, Melly. I think a little bit of thought into what the purpose of the webinar is. Is it to create a standard template for a webinar that can be replicated at an individual level for each country, so that anybody looking from any jurisdiction understands how that information is being presented? Because once it's up on YouTube and out on social media, it's accessible for everybody to look at any time rather than just at a specific point in time. So is it done like the AIVC has done with their ventilation information papers, for example, that there's a standard format for presenting that particular code, so that if I'm looking at France and I'm looking at Germany and then I'm looking at India, I have some sense of relativity between them? Mm-hmm. Or do we do it at a theme? Is it going to be useful for people to see building energy codes in Europe? Or is it going to be useful for people to see building energy codes between different parts of the world for context? So I think maybe just a little bit of thought about the presentation, about what's the point, and then how would people access it? And then that would then feed into how we might use the mailing lists to promote it, I would say.
Yep. Sounds excellent. So what we are at our time. So what I propose is I'll work on this idea a little bit and give it some thoughts. Maybe I'll reach out to some of you to provide me feedback on the ideas, and then maybe we can have a meeting, another meeting to go over the strategy on that. Maybe in a month's time. What does everybody think? Is it too early or?
I think
Yeah,
I think
go
a
ahead, Mike.
month is okay, but it probably needs to be some back and forth. Just on what the different topics are, who the audience is, developing the ideas as Simon just articulated, and for a topic like affordability, there's so many different ways that you could come at it. So as well, like I'd like to have a clearer understanding of what would be covered and.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So tentatively in a month's time, depending on how much time I have to reach out to you and how much time you have to. We are all working on the side of our desks on this, so like we have to have a bit of an understanding. Anyway, so I'm going to be reaching out to you in the next week or two, and we'll follow this up in a month's time or so. Is that fine with everybody? Excellent. Yep. Thank you all. This has been such an excellent experience for me. And I really appreciate your openness in sharing your information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.